We truly live in a beautiful country with some of the most captivating home locations. In this series, we'll be showcasing the very best that South Africa has to offer. From private penthouses to sprawling city mansions, we've got it all. It's all about showing you how the architects and the designers and the homeowners put it all together. I'm Tumelo Setlaba, and this is Finest Homes.
In today's episode of Finest Homes, we take a look at a testimony to the timelessness and versatility of mid-century modern architecture. We explore a glass and steel structure that rests in the rolling veldt of a Gauteng eco-farm estate.
How's it going?
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Waffles. That's awesome. I can't wait. Thank you, home and workspace.
When architect Gillian Hall and her husband Ivan bought a stand in the grassland surrounds of an eco-farm in Gauteng, her abiding enthusiasm for 20th century modern architecture finally found a fitting platform for expression. One of her chief objectives was to capitalize on the natural surrounds. They designed the stunning abode within the natural context and the estate's sustainable ethos.
Wow, Jill, this view is absolutely breathtaking. I can totally see how you fell in love with this location, especially because I believe it serves the function of a home and a workspace. So tell me, what were the deciding factors that made this location the one?
Definitely the views of the Renosterspruit Conservancy, as well as the design ethos of the farm, which is more sustainable orientated. That really resonated with us, being conscious of the environment.
And there's nothing that says eco-friendly like an eco-pool, and I absolutely love that. What I love more about that, though, is when you pan from the exterior right into the interior, there's almost a seamless transition. How would you describe this architectural style?
It's contemporary South African architecture, but in this case, we really wanted to blur the lines between the interior and the exterior. And by using the steel frame structure and creating large openings with stack doors, you get that feeling that you're living in nature. And there's this symbiosis between nature and your living spaces, which really creates a great ambience and also just brings relaxation to a person and just connects them to where they live.
So you've combined wood and glass and concrete and even steel structures, and it works.
Well, the materials we used complement each other in their natural form. So we didn't want to be pretentious in the honesty of materials and the use of them. So we also, when we got to the site, we ended up with a large amount of soil on the site, and then we created the rammed earth wall, which also ties into that sustainable principle of passive design. And the colors of the rammed earth wall transcended into the corten steel and the rusted steel inside structures and so forth. And the wood, on the ceilings.
Well, it sounds like the elements really do work well together, and it's a well-considered project. What was your kind of brief for this project initially?
Well, we are a family living in the home, so it had to have the functional aspects and then also practical aspects. But then we also have a home office, so we had to really consider different spaces like public and private spaces, more intimate spaces, spaces that are more socially, vibrant, and also where you're able to entertain and, yes, express yourself with this beautiful view. Welcoming people into your home and letting them also form part of nature and the context.
Did you face any challenges when you were trying to achieve this?
Yes, the site is quite elongated, and we wanted to orientate the building in a proper way so that we'd get northern light into the house in the summer months and winter. So we created courtyards And it was quite a challenge with the elongated site, but the courtyard introduction created external spaces connected with walkways and, you know, doors that open and then the sun could enter. And we also then introduced pergolas on the outside so that in the summer you have these green indigenous pergola plants growing, creating shade, and then in the winter it loses its leaves and then the sun can permeate the building.
Well, Jill, I love what's happening out here in the exteriors, but I'm going to go inside and chat to Shanae about the interiors. I'll see you later.
The kitchen, which lies at the far end of the space, is where Gillian most enjoys spending time with Yvonne and their son Noah. It's also the area she feels most successfully materializes her vision of creating an interior that continues the architectural language of the house. Despite the sense of contemporary sophistication cemented immediately at the entrance by an impressive cantilever concrete slab, whimsical and playful touches in the interior create balance. Curiously suspended light fittings, jolts of vibrant colour, and seemingly incongruous items of retro furniture top it all off.
Shanae, I think it's so brilliant how the external architectural language speaks perfectly with the interior design. Talk to me about the layout and the flow of the house.
Yes, I really think that translation of language between the external architecture and the internal details makes the project successful. Joel spoke previously about the materials that they utilized in the external structure, and I think what gives this design its true South African contemporary identity is by successfully pulling that into the interior details.
There are very specifically South African elements in this room, and I absolutely love it. Talk to me how you integrated a local kind of sense to this room.
It was important for the client and for us as architects to support local craftsmen and designers. So if you look through the space, a lot of the elements are local art pieces that are also functional, that functions as furniture as part of the space. For example, we have the Casamenta couch, which is a hand-embroidered, crafted couch. The kitchen was also a custom designed item by the architects. It was done by Guzmo carpenters or Guzmo joinery. They specialize in woodwork and they're really true to their craft. What also brings this building alive is the fact that, once again, speaking to the external and internal language of the architecture is how the steel elements are pulled through smaller details of the house. If you, for example, look at all the handles on the kitchen cupboards, they were specifically fabricated to serve as a pull or push function from smaller steel sections that you can buy off the shelf. Also, items such as your typical skirting or cornice was exchanged for something custom fabricated from steel sections. I just think that transition between the language, once again, really brings the identity to the interior of the home.
And your use of colour and texture?
With the use of colour and texture, the true finish of the materials were utilized. So instead of applying a finish afterwards, elements such as the rammed earth wall, the corten steel, the steel beams, they all have their natural finish that contributes to this palette. Secondly, in the interior furniture pieces, all the custom pieces that were sourced and created for this home, each of them contribute a different texture and a different color to this African palette that we try to create inside.
Lovely. Well, I just love it from the inside out.
Don't go anywhere. After the break, we explore further into the heart of this beautiful eco-farm home. In today's episode of Finest Homes, we take a look at a testimony to the timelessness and versatility of mid-century modern architecture.
Yvonne, this is a great canvas to work from, and it seems like the perfect place for creative minds to meet. How involved were you in the design process?
Both Jill and myself, we are very hands-on when it comes to creating things. I'm a mechanical engineer, and bringing into reality Jill's creativity and ideas was a really memorable experience. Obviously, there were some disagreements along the way, and I think that's normal building a house, and really believe that Jill's got it all under control.
I see a cantilever slab behind you. Now, did that pose any design challenges at all for you?
Look, there were lots of elements that we really had to think about in terms of interfacing all of them to make it work. The cantilever slab was a design challenge. We used an old Polish civil and structural engineer, and he really had his hand full with this cantilever slab. But at the end, I think like many other professionals that worked on this project, he did his magic.
And there's something truly special about this space, something quite magical. Is that because you had your family in mind while building it?
Yes, for sure. Family life for us is really defined by all the interactions and activities we as a family have together. And that surely played a role in the whole design process of the house. Typically the inside-outside living. Noah, our son, he just loves playing inside the house and obviously running outside, playing ball. Yeah, sometimes it's really a chaos.
We're only a stone throw away from Sandton, actually, but it feels like we're in the heart of a nature reserve. Tell me about that experience.
Yes, Tumelo, that's exactly why we chose this specific site. It's really indoor-outdoor living. I'm an avid cyclist, so obviously the cradle is around the corner. So it's basically just jumping onto the bike and you're free to ride.
And your son gets to run wild and free.
Yes, he absolutely loves the outdoor living. And yes, obviously blessed to be in this space.
Absolutely.
At the centre of the house, separating the office space from the bedroom wing, is a 14-metre-long open-plan living area, enclosed on either elevation by wall-to-wall retractable glass sliding doors. One side frames the entrance courtyard, and the other captures panoramic views of the distant Magaliesberg Mountains.
You've included natural elements in your living spaces. For example, your bedrooms lead into this lush garden courtyard. How did you maintain this harmony between your spaces?
Well, we created this internal courtyard to be like an exterior room with natural indigenous landscaping so that it just draws the visitors back into nature. The courtyard we're standing in was placed here so that we get more northern light into the southern wing. It's not one big mass of an architectural building. By splitting it up into courtyards, we integrate nature as well as great orientation so that we don't heat and cool spaces too much. And it's also very integral on this side of the home because it's more of the private space. So we've got like an internal walkway that links all the bedrooms and the playroom together. We used different elements in different rooms to accentuate spaces.
Yeah, there's a distinct kind of inside-outside theme that runs across the house. But how much of your personal style is infused in the bedrooms?
Well, the main bedroom has a neutral palette and it ties into a more intimate space. So you come into the main bathroom and it also has these spectacular views of the Magaliesberg that we utilised, and it has very neutral colours, calming colours, relaxing. And you always just want to take a bath because the view's so beautiful. And then the main bedroom feature is the light. It was a private commission that we did with ostrich eggs. So it just brings that whole South African feel back into the home and just creates a focal point in a space that is just beautiful.
Yeah.
In the spirit of sustainability, Gillian met the challenge of a design with reduced running costs by orientating the house just off north and employing roof overhangs which optimize the angle of the winter sun, while creepers create shading in the summer.
Jill, this is a really special garden to take on. What was your vision for the landscaping?
Well, the landscaping has to tie into the context, just like the interior and the architecture ties together. So we used natural, indigenous vegetation in terms of shrubs and trees. And we also, on the farm, there's a rule not to have fencing, so we did berms, which create privacy that we hydro-seeded.
I noticed that you have no fences, which means you have no bounds in terms of what you could do with your garden. What do you think are the key features of your garden?
I would say the koi pond upon entry invites the visitors in to the space and gives them that tranquil feeling to hear the water in the background. And then we have the eco pool that is also built on the sustainable ethos. It's like swimming in a dam on a farm, except it's stylized and it has like this natural filter, so there's no chlorine and it's very natural, and yeah, it's just a lovely feeling you get when you swim. We've got rainwater harvesting from our roofs. So through the rainwater harvesting, we utilize the water for irrigation of the landscape. So there's a full cycle in this house.
Jill, I have to say, this is the perfect depiction of South African contemporary architecture. And what I love most about it is its nod to eco-friendliness. And that ultimately pays homage to our beautiful homelands.
Tumelo, it's been such a pleasure having you all around.
Thank you for having us. Next time, we're going to party.
We most definitely are.
Up next, we'll give you a few tips and tricks on how to get this look in your own home. In today's episode of Finest Homes, we take a look at a testimony to the timelessness and versatility of mid-century modern architecture.
Now that we've seen how the architects and designers of felt architects have done it, it's time to bring it back home and break it down into workable chunks for you and I to tackle in our own home spaces. Now, I've brought in a helping hand, and it wouldn't be Finest Homes if we didn't have the very best. Spanning 23 years in the interior design industry, working on esteemed leisure and residential projects for presidents, top CEOs, African royalty, and South Africa's 5-star hotel groups, I'm joined today by the lioness of Africa herself, Nthabi Daugwong.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tumelo.
Welcome
Pleasure to be here.
to the show.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now Nthabi, I'm super excited because our first theme for our first episode is Mzansi Chic. And that was from a home that was built by felt architects and designers.
Yes.
And I would love for you to talk me through the space. The first thing I noticed was the fact that from walking in, you could see right through to the other side of the home.
Absolutely.
Now, that might be terrifying for the average homeowner.
Yes.
Where do I start?
So, what felt architects managed to capture very well was the inside-out feel, that nature and interior were one.
Absolutely.
And obviously the flow and blend of colors and textures helped to bring the outside in. And what we're going to do now is start with the basics. Wood, metal, and leathers.
Right.
And then how you soften that look, obviously you go into the fabrics, the accent cushions and pattern fabric, and the rugs, so that you've got that organic, earthy element,
Yes.
which is where the Mzansi creativity comes in and flows throughout the interior.
Well, I'm glad you started with these three as a foundation with the woods and the steel, because that was a massive kind of theme across the
Yes,
whole home.
yes.
But they had a lot of wood and metal and kind of different materials that worked all together,
Yes.
but softened it up with a few fabrics that kept it quite natural
Yes.
and soft with really, really lush tones.
So when you're trying to get the look, it's not trying to get it word for word or design element for design element. So us bringing in the wood, we're bringing it through a TV unit.
Right.
We're suggesting also wood as a laminate, because you can't use screed floors in your own space, then you can figure out other ways we can do it. The leather tones also have a very masculine, metallic or woody type of feel to them that links back to those elements of nature that we're trying to bring through. If you look at the side tables as well,
Yeah.
again, wood. And what they've done with the balance obviously is glass, because we want to have that airy feel in that space.
Absolutely.
When you look through that interior, you feel like you're just floating through. There's nothing heavy that's cutting you in those spaces. And that's achieved by using a lot of glass, a lot of space, and a lot of air throughout the interior.
Speaking of air and floating, one thing I did notice when you walked into the home, you see a beautiful floating chair that's a perfect kind of element with the natural background in the back with the beautiful mountains.
yes.
And then as you're walking through the home, you see a stunning chandelier kind of perpendicular to the hanging chair. So you almost have two kind of floating objects.
Yes.
Talk to us about how you think about placing those two elements.
So the magic of achieving good design is to not allow the furniture to read as one flat element. You've got to raise, you've got to drop, you've got to choose the elements. And in this house, I've chosen the chandelier to lift and the swing to lift. And everything else is low, floating, and that makes you feel relaxed in that space. And also because all the items are open. There's nothing heavy and bulky in there. So that helps the feeling of airiness keep on floating through the interior.
I must say, I did notice that the room was quite airy, and the fact that this doesn't get in the way because of kind of the transparency of it all makes a real big difference.
It does.
But one thing that it also does add is a bit of texture, right?
Yes.
And that's not just from kind of the pattern that it creates, you also get a bit of texture from the fabric that they've used on the couch.
And yes, you can pick that up through the fabrics we're recommending in the scheme that are very durable. And then also picking up on the patterns in this cushion scheme is looking at local manufacturing and finding prints that will complement the scheme and bringing in that magic of Mzansi-ness.
And you know what, speaking of Mzansi chic, right, what I love most about is the fact that they haven't used kind of the typical shwe, or, you know, we've kind of gone with the pattern and it still kind of resonates with the African spirit, but it's still minimalist in some sense.
And I think when we're trying to say Mzansi chic, what is it? How we've achieved that is the earthy tones of Africa. And obviously using them in modern interior, modern furniture, just gives it that little element of chicness.
Now I want to continue walking through the space, right? I'm going to turn this over and show you what I noticed.
Yes.
In that space, the kind of layout and flow read kind of as one solid room. However, there were distinct elements that separated the room into kind of three different sections. We had the kitchen, we had the dining table, which seemed to be its own element on its own, and then we had kind of a living area that was divided by
the logs.
Yes.
And they cleverly put on some old railway track type of thing, which is a very good idea of dividing a room without having to use glass, partitioning, fabric, wallpaper. It's something new and it's low. Remember what I was talking about playing on the heights and the elements in there? And if you don't have the street feel that you could use, just get an element of it to suggest what you can achieve in that space to help you divide. Also, the sculptures that we've chosen are just wood pieces. And again, the spacing, giving the feeling of airy flow, is coming through very well in this area. And in the dining area, the use of wood elements, choosing either to do a leather seat or a fully wood seat with probably fabric upholstered on the seat, helps with the natural elements of playing on the concrete, on the wood, and the flowing of the air in the space.
There's almost like an ease to this. It really doesn't sound too...
It's laid back. It's stress-free when you walk in here. It's uncomplicated.
Now, one of our favorite things about this home was that most of the interior designs and the interiors were locally manufactured. And I really want to fixate on the kitchen cabinetry for a second. The handles themselves are made of steel, which I loved so much because usually steel can seem quite heavy and industrial, yet they use it quite cleverly. What are some of those examples that you've seen around?
So the clever use of steel in this interior is the proportion of it in relation to the furniture, in relation to the wood cabinetry, in relation to the room. It's subtle. So what happens is, if that's a proportion of the steel, the wood plays a dominant size and the steel becomes an accent, which helps to ground the scheme. The steel doesn't take such a predominance in the scheme. And also it's dark, it's not shiny, it's not metallically glamorous. Therefore, it's earthy already in the use of the subtle tones to it. And that helps to just bring the interior back home. You can also see the steel details that we are suggesting here on the wood elements. Again, just as a bar around the mirror, thin little elements of steel, but a continuous flow of what the architectural elements of the home are doing right here.
If I'm wanting to convert my home space into Mzansi chic, spectacular frenzy, what would you say are my top 3 items that I should at least just start with?
First of all, let's start with the basics. So this look is made up of predominantly the corner suite, the TV unit, and if you had to choose any of these elements, I would go for the swing chair.
Oh, I was crossing fingers to choose that.
As a piece de resistance to bring into this element. If you don't have a corner suite, another way to achieve this look is just to upholster it in that feel. So we're not saying take out your stuff, we're just saying how do we get this look, and it's just to find fabrics that complement the scheme that you're trying to achieve.
It's about working with what you have.
Absolutely, and building on that in time. If you can't find the fabrics, find the planters, find the basket weave that has those patterns that you can bring in to complement this look of clean lines with beautiful tribal patterns that you can bring through. I love that you pointed out the planter, because I mean, we've said that you should work with what you have, and not all of us have the luxury of having, you know, completely transparent walls and, you know, massive gardens. Yes. And so this is a perfect alternative, right? You don't have to cut yourself short. Yes, because not all of us have the luscious green foliage growing somewhere in our homes. So what we can do is just do a big, delicious indoor plant in a beautiful basket, strategically placed in your interior to bring that tropical vibe into a very clean look. Yes. This helps just to bring nature in and balance our senses.
I love that. Natural and easy.
Absolutely. Mzansi style.
Mzansi style.
When I think of a modern South African home surrounded by natural terrain, this is what comes to mind. And with an African sunset like that, how can you go wrong? This truly is a finest home.